Welcome back to the Moms Like Me podcast powered by Support Now. Today, I am joined by Morgan Cutlip. Morgan is an author, relationship builder, wife, mom, creator. I truly don't know how she does it all like so beautifully and with so much grace, at least on the outside looking in. I know it's very difficult. But today, we're going to be diving into really what I would consider like her masterclass, which is about relationships, both with yourselves and with your partner, which doesn't often get a lot of attention. So Morgan, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's so great to be here.
Of course, of course. So Morgan, for people that aren't as familiar with you and with your content, I'd love for you to give them a little bit of background on who you are, what you're doing, and kind of what got you here.
Yeah, so my story is kind of like goes back pretty far. So I'll just give you the very quick overview. But I got into this profession because my dad is in this profession. So way back when I was a little girl, he went back to school for his doctorate. And I ended up going to classes with him quite often. And I would sit there and I would take notes. I was in probably like second or third grade. And then every long drive we'd have together, we would play this game where he would give me a hypothetical case and ask me, like, how would you support this couple? What would you do for this family? What do you think's going on with this little boy? And we would analyze it. And it became just this, like, super special time for us to connect. And one of my favorite sort of memories with my dad and favorite things we did together. So he had a practice and eventually got into relationship education and started speaking and traveling and creating courses before like everybody, was creating courses. This is a long time ago.
An innovator. He was ahead of his time.
He was ahead of his time. So I started traveling with him. Sometimes I'd speak with him, and I knew that I wanted to go into this same profession. So I pursued my education, got my doctorate, did all those things, and then probably when I was in undergrad, I remember leaving an event with my dad, and I said to him, someday I'm gonna do stuff to support women. I don't know what that looks like, but like you got your thing, that's gonna be my thing. And it really didn't become clear to me until after I became a mom. And I kind of was like in his world doing his stuff for all these over 15 years and became a mom. And I was like, wow, this is not at all what I expected with all my education, all my knowledge. It really shook my world and it shook my relationship, honestly. Like in full transparency, that was not an easy or a pretty time for our relationship. And so I knew at that moment, I want to support moms. I want to help them to navigate motherhood in an entirely new way because it's so much and it's so much changed in our lives. We're really never quite the same after. And I also want to equip couples to navigate these times together in a way that they feel connected, like they're on the same team. I'm not about making one partner the bad guy. But yeah, so this has been sort of my life's mission. And I feel like, it goes together. How moms relate to themselves, how we define and speak up for what we need and all these things really informs how we exist in our relationships. And so that's a space I live in.
I have got to ask you. So you said when you were little, you were going to your dad's classes. How little is little? How old were you?
I think okay, this is gonna age me, but it's fine. Whatever. I'm over it. But do you remember those play doctor kits that were plastic? Like they came in plastic briefcases?
Yes.
So I was taking that filled with office supplies to his class. So I had to have been first grade, second grade, somewhere in there. And this is crazy because I ended up getting my doctorate from the same school he got his doctorate at. And I had one of the same professors of a class that I attended when I was like in first grade.
Wow. And by the way, your dad just must be so proud of you to see you carry out this vision and this dream and to do it in the way that you're doing it at a time where I think I know your ambition was always to support women and it obviously evolved into moms. But as you know, we live in a time where being a mom comes with more pressure. The pace of life is different. The expectations are different. We're juggling and balancing not just a home life, but oftentimes a professional life as well. I'd love for you to speak to a little bit more about what you just said. You said that you were shook. What exactly shook you? The expectation you had versus what actually happened. What was that like for you? What did that feel like?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of different things. I think one way is that it was my expectations that I had for myself. So my mom, she was adopted, and she was adopted by two parents who were like actually pretty uninvolved in her
Mm.
life. And so she sort of reacted to this experience by becoming something incredibly different when she became a mom. So my mom was like the definition of super mom that like we would use in like the 90s, early whatever, 80s and 90s, a super mom. That was her. She was coached everything, room mom for everything. So unbeknownst to me, like all of these kind of frameworks and expectations lived inside of me for all these years before I had kids. And I never really unearthed them or analyzed them. And then when I became a mom, they all just rushed to the surface. And my life looks dramatically different. My husband travels every single week for work. During the time we had our daughter, we did a cross-country relocation. My husband left 8 months before I did. So I did the first, like, whatever on my own. I work part-time from home. So like I could not take the expectations that I gathered from my growing up experience, having that as a mom, and place them on myself. But I did for a while until I realized it and changed them. But I think that was a big piece of it, was that I always felt like I was never enough and I was falling short. And I think that's part of why. I think it's, the other thing too is just like your marriage changes. It's like all of a sudden you're like all these other expectations about what marriage is going to look like after kids and what your partner's going to be like, toward you after you have kids, or even as a parent, rush to the surface that you didn't know or didn't examine previously. And you're like, I don't like how this is. I don't like how you are. Why aren't you doing enough? So it was just like a slew of all this stuff rushed in. And then plus the responsibilities like grow exponentially overnight. And I just felt buried. I just felt incredibly buried. And I was naive. I was like, oh, I'll just like, I'll just have her next to me while I work. Like, which was
Sound like
impossible.
me.
But I totally believed that. And I just did not anticipate how difficult everything would be and how unrecognizable I would feel to myself.
Yeah, I think that's something that so many people can relate to. This is very personal, but I remember after giving birth to my first, I almost remember feeling this like sense of emptiness where I thought I was supposed to feel this immediate rush of love and joy. And I was so shocked and so exhausted and so overwhelmed. I didn't really feel anything. And that guilt lived with me for a long time and it's taken me and I know I'm not alone anymore. It's taken me years to have true love. And I think again, there's so much pressure on moms to just immediately fall in love with their kids and fall in love with motherhood. And for some people that happens, but for a lot of moms it doesn't. And I think Instagram really contributes to this idea of this very like harmonious view on motherhood and this instant bond. And for a lot of people, there's a disconnect at first.
Oh my gosh, I was riddled with anxiety. I don't run as an anxious person, but after our daughter was born, I was riddled with anxiety. And so it I think a lot of the hormones, and then also it's just normal sometimes not to bond right away, but a lot of that stuff clouds that early experience, and then that doesn't live up to what you imagined it be. So then
Right.
again, another opportunity to feel like right off the bat, I'm failing at this motherhood thing, and what the heck is wrong with me? And that's one just like tricky and heavy way to enter into motherhood.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about a phrase that I attribute to you. I know it's used a lot, but you talk a lot about mental load. Talk to me more about what is mental load? How do you explain that to people? Let's start there.
Okay, so I'll go 30,000 feet and then you just interrupt me, okay? Because I could talk about this all day. 30,000 feet, and then I'll get a little bit into the weeds. So 30,000 foot definition is the mental load is basically like the never ending to do list that we carry around in our heads that has two key components. One, mostly it's invisible. Number two, it takes up cognitive real estate, which means it crowds out other things in our brain. So if you're like, we always are like, that's just mom life, but it's like when we're forgetful, or we have a hard time regulating, or we just have a hard time making decisions, or we can't get in the mood for sex. Like all this stuff is stuff that we need some space in our brains to access. So it crowds some of that stuff out. And for the most part, in the home, everybody has a mental load, by the way. This is not like a woman thing. However, when it comes to the home and family life, the mental load is predominantly carried by women and is a massive source of resentment in relationships. So the in the weeds definition, and why I like to give this one, is because a really big sticking point for couples is that when the woman recognizes, like, yes, the mental load, this is the thing that's been wearing on me, and she tries to explain it to her partner, a lot of times it feels kind of silly. It's like, oh, I have to cook dinner, I have to get the kids to school and fill out their forms and do these things. And then her partner's like, okay, that, whatever, like, make a list, well, I'll help. What do you want me to do? They just kind of like, it can become easily minimized and not seem like a big deal. So here is the in the weeds. There's 3 domains of tasks with a mental load. There's the physical, that's like doing the dishes, mowing the lawn, doing the laundry. So let's imagine these are like, we're going to do a Venn diagram. Am I saying that right? Okay. Then there's yeah, I'm like, yes. So physical is one circle. And then overlapping that is the mental. And that's like making the list. So making the grocery list, or at work, a lot of it's mental. Like I got to respond to emails. I got to do this, schedule that, whatever, submit finance reports. So there's that. And then this is the kicker that people really struggle to understand, and mostly men struggle to understand, which is the emotional. So that's the third circle. The emotional is like the regular calculations, looking at cause and effects of how decisions and different things in the home and family life affect the experiences of family members. It's the worry work. It's the research. It's the thinking through scenarios like, oh, if we put our daughter, we change schools to go to a better school, are we going to affect her social life forever and ruin her? Or if we don't change to the better school, we're going to affect her educational attainment, and this is going to affect her whole future. It's these things that feel like the stakes are really, really high. And this stuff is completely invisible and requires a very deep knowing of your family. So it's difficult to outsource. Plus, it follows you everywhere. So here's the final piece. Where these 3 overlap, I just call it, I've made this up, but this is what I call it, the triple threat. So that's at the center. Most of the tasks in the mental load of the home and family life can be unpacked to contain all 3 domains. So when you say making dinner, it's not just the cooking of the dinner. It's the thinking through food preferences and sensitivities and doing the grocery shopping and thinking through what's in your fridge. It's so much more, which is why the mental load and the different tasks that occupy it take up so much space, overwhelm women, why they feel like they're never done, why they have a hard time relaxing, is because this stuff is kind of always turning around in our heads.
Wow. Perfect definition. And the visual actually, I find to be extremely helpful in this context. So I agree, obviously. That's a real thing. And to your point, I think that most husbands, they want to help. They don't want to feel like they're not being a supportive partner. They want to play an active role. I think today we live in I think the generation of men that are checked out is kind of gone. I think that more and more millennial husbands are playing a far more active role, and there's still a deficit in the house primarily. So how do you begin to like narrow that gap? And I know you're coming out with a book on all of this, so just give me the teaser version of this, but how do you begin to kind of work through that so that you avoid having any more tension or any more stress in your house than necessary.
Well, I like that you started by saying that men are actually moving in the right direction, because when you exist a lot on social media, a lot of this content will kind of make them out to be the bad guys. The answer to this is often, well, the man just needs to do more. And I think, we have changed dramatically as women and as a society, where we're now like, we are doing more. We're carrying more, of the workload outside of the home. We're often in the workforce. And so we're actually like requiring a lot more out of our relationships, and we're wanting a lot more out of men. So there's this kind of like, I think we're in like the lag time. This is how I analyze it. Men are not like failing us. I don't believe that's a helpful approach. I don't think criticism is a conducive space to enter into change. They're not failing us, but we have a little lag time where we're like, we've advanced. Come on, guys, we're ready for you. So I think one of the most important things as a couple gets ready to approach this conversation and to approach kind of making some shifts in their relationship is that you align where you are on the same team and the mental load is the enemy. I think our socialization is the enemy. I think hustle culture, the cost of living. I think, this sort of like push to always be productive. These demands of modern society are the enemy in our relationships. It's not one another. And we have to start from that place if we're going to ever enter into meaningful conversation and change around the mental load. And so that's the first section of my book is like defining it, because men kind of struggle to get it. And so I wanted to like do the heavy lifting for women, so you don't need to carry that burden. Like, let me explain it. But then also it's really getting to understand each other's perspectives and aligning so you're on the same team. So you're like, okay, this really sucks about modern life. Also intensive parenting. I talk about that in my first book. We are parenting in a whole new way, which is way more demanding on our time and our energy and all the things. So we got to align together that it's like us versus the world. And I think that's a really good starting point for couples. I can get more specific if you want, but
No, I think that I think that's very, very helpful. It's not, I think that when you think about fights or arguments that happen in a house, it's often you didn't do this, or I need you to do that, or you're being too sensitive, or you hear and see things like that play out all the time. And by the way, you see this on TV and in movies. So we're kind of like perpetuating this you versus me thing, this husband versus wife thing, which is not, again, not productive. So I think kind of labeling what it is so important. And I think about like in my own marriage, we have a rule, like nothing lingers. If something's bothering you, you say something and you say it right away, because as you know, these things build and build and build. But it sounds like really the first thing is truly identifying like what it is that is creating this overwhelm, that's creating this stress, that's creating the exhaustion. Because if you can label that, now you're in a position to be far more constructive and beginning to be more solution oriented of like, okay, how are we going to fix this? How do we, and not just how do we fix it now, but how can we fix it so that this doesn't become a reoccurring thing?
Yes, you got to define it, because when you define something, then you have options about what you want to do with it. So it's like, let's define the villain in our relationship and let's put it on the table. I think the other piece, and this is broader as well, but I get like very in the weeds on this stuff in terms of practical suggestions and strategies for couples. But the other thing is like, you have to get good at talking about it without it unraveling into an ordeal. I mean, so I did survey data, and then I did interviews with both men and women on the mental load. And like the biggest thing that comes up over and over again is just that anytime I bring it up, we like kind of spiral into this major argument. Like he gets defensive, or we're in the hardship Olympics. Who does what? Oh, who's more tired? And so it's not productive. And I'm not seeing a lot of content out there, which is what my book provides, that like helps couples figure out how to talk about it. Another reason why you need to get good at it is because it changes every day. It's like, I told you before we hopped on, I was like, I got, this lady merged into my car the other day, that my mental load and all on my list completely grew in a matter of moments, because I have now more stuff I got to handle. Think about the holidays, think about birthdays. It's like the load and responsibilities in family life change regularly. And
Yep.
so what will happen if you can't talk about it well is one person just absorbs it. They just absorb, and I like to call women, we're like bounty quicker picker uppers, where we just absorb everything, and then to the
A great
point.
sponsor for your podcast.
I know. Hey, did you hear that? Yeah, but it's like we absorb it all to the point where we become so saturated we end up breaking. And so if you aren't able to talk about it because it's always changing, and so you don't just assume the tasks, then you have a major problem in your relationship, and this is not going to go away. So the book really equips couples with like strategies for talking through this conversation, and then gives them a plan for moving forward. Okay, how are you going to actually navigate this regularly in your relationship? And I give them some structure for that because I think that's really important so you don't get in the weeds.
I love that. And I think the thing that stands out about what you just said, which I feel often, is just the irregularity of your weeks. We all like to, we see this a lot at the beginning of a new year, right? Everyone's planning and goals and ideals, and this is what the schedule looks like. And then life happens. I think of this past January where there were snow days and sick days and MLK Day. And for most households, you could have the best plan in the world, but most households have very little margin for error. And so when that margin of error happens, you have to be equipped, what you're saying is, with the toolkit to say, okay, how are we going to handle it when things don't go, quote, as planned? And any parent out there in the world knows that most of your life goes unplanned. You're going to get a call in the middle of your day that your kid has a fever. You're going to get a call that someone that you love has had something happen, and like that is a part of it. And I think just the way that you're talking about it is so smart. I want to ask you a question that kind of takes this conversation slightly in a different way. Part of the thing that I obsess over is support. I love talking about support and community support. My question to you as a mom, is there anything that as a culture or as communities, as moms that support other moms, that you think that we can be doing that would positively contribute to reducing the mental load? You talked about earlier, like we are in this hustle culture and you talked about your mom, like doing the room mom thing and the team mom thing. There's so much pressure to do it all. What are some tactics that as moms that you think that we could possibly be doing to support one another in reducing this mental load, or just normalizing kind of talking about it?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think one thing you just said, which is like we have to be able to talk about it. I think that, and I think we're here. I mean, you see it's kind of like goes to extremes sometimes, but even sometimes online we'll see like so much negativity about these things. So it's like, wait, it's not so bad. Like, let's rein it in. Where motherhood can get like a bad reputation. But I do think that in our closest relationships, we have to be able to be transparent. We have to talk about this stuff in a way that's productive. We don't want to be like hating on our partners, but able to like share these things and just kind of normalize it. I think we really need to normalize it. This is not new. This has been going on. You watch sitcoms from when we're growing up. Like, this stuff is happening. If you read stuff like old pieces of literature from way back when, like in the 50s and earlier, like women are talking about this back then. It's become very mainstream, but I think we have to continue that conversation and normalize it. I think the other thing is that women, we have to get better at asking for help. We are horrible at it. It feels so deeply uncomfortable for us, I think, especially because we have internalized this messaging that we should be able to do it all, but we're doing way more than we've ever done before. So why do we think we can just keep like upping the responsibilities and all the things and still do it all without having a breaking point? So I think we need to practice asking other moms and reciprocating for support in our relationships and family life. Like, it feels good to have a network of moms where you're like, hey, I got a lot going on this week. Like, can the kids come over and hang with you for a little bit? Like, that stuff is life-saving. And moms love to support one another, but we just don't ask. I think once you begin asking, if your friends don't commonly do that, your circle, I think you sort of like break the ice. to where you're
Yeah.
like saying this is an okay thing to do. And this is why I love support now. I know you're like, this isn't about that, but I love it because it's like, it's a safe way to ask. It's once removed, and you're not just asking for money. You could ask for all these different things that really make someone's life better and easier and more manageable. So
Well,
I think it's
I
amazing.
appreciate that. No,
Yeah.
you again, it's a passion point of mine, and I think there is such overlap in what we talk about, and kind of like how we're both helping women, how we're both helping moms and parents and communities, because it's so core. And I am such a firm believer that we've lost touch with our village. And I think there's a variety of physical factors that contribute to that. I think there's a lot. The internet has a lot to do with that.
Yes.
And so these things compound, and then you have the projection of perfection that we're constantly inundated by, that adds to this feeling that, well, this person seems to have it together because they're doing this, this, and this, and going on this vacation, and their kids are doing all these activities, and so it must be a me problem. I must not be able to figure it out, or it must be a me and my husband. We're the ones struggling. So I just think this is a really important conversation to have. And, you talk about on your website that you're on a mission to help women feel like more empowered in their relationships. And I think that the tools that you're providing not only give them that feeling of empowerment, you're really giving them very practical ways of having conversations with the person they love most, the person they're committed to say, let's do this together. Let's figure this out together. You don't have to be on this journey alone. In fact, if you can partner with your loved one, with your significant other, that will really unlock so much light for you and so much connection for you.
Oh my gosh. I mean, the quality of our relationship with our partner, our spouse, our significant other, whatever, has such a dramatic impact on how we experience motherhood and our life. So, yeah, I appreciate all that you said about my practical tools. That's like something that's very important to me, is to make sure stuff is actually like implementable in your life. But it's time like worth spending when it comes to like impacting your relationship and working on your relationship, because it changes everything in such a powerful way.
Well, and I spend a lot of time with families with medically complex kiddos or chronic illness, special needs families. The divorce rate in special needs is quadruple what it is the regular divorce rate. And so I'm really hoping this message reaches not just all moms, but specifically moms that are navigating more difficult seasons of life, because inevitably your relationship is going to change again as you take on an entirely new load, new fears, new steps like in your day. Like everything is different. And so I would just want to end on this note. Where can people find out about the book and you, and where can they follow you, so that as people and as moms are on their journeys, they feel like they have the proper resources to help them along the way?
Sure. So you can find me on Instagram. My handle's Dr. Morgan Cutlip. That's like an injury to the lip. Thank you to my husband for that. And then my website is drmorgancutlip.com. And then the new book on the mental load is called A Better Share: How Couples Can Tackle the Mental Load for More Fun, Less Resentment, and Great Sex. We didn't even talk about that part, but that's a big part.
That'll be part 2.
Yeah, happy part 2. You can get it pre-ordered. I don't know when this will release, but pre-orders are like the best way to like honor and thank me for my work, or just like be a part of things. They mean so much to authors. So it's for pre-order now. And I have special thank you bonuses. Like I have a free guide on ADHD and the mental load, which is a big deal. There's like a lot of nuance when someone has ADHD to navigating this. And then my other book is for moms. So it's called Love Your Kids Without Losing Yourself: 5 Steps to Banish Guilt and Beat Burnout When You Already Have Too Much to Do. And that book is like, my heart is in that book. I just love, I mean, they're both great, but just it's a lot of my story and my kids. And every tip is presented and how it applies to your relationship with your kids and your relationship with yourself. So yeah,
I love it.
Wherever you buy books. Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Morgan Cutlip, amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today. And again, I'm very hopeful that this will reach many more people, not just to sell more books, but to really just help them in their own relationships, and particularly for my support now families that are navigating really, challenging times, whether that's bringing home a healthy baby or taking care of a sick loved one. These are the real resources that mean the world to me to be able to provide back to this community. So Morgan, thank you so much and look forward to future conversations with you and watching all your success.
Likewise. Thank you so much.